This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I bought this infrared converted camera way back in December, and I've honestly been a little bit intimidated to try it. I was convinced that it would be a little bit techie and a little bit over my head and I wouldn't get the results that I wanted, but recently I took the plunge and absolutely fell in love with this style of photography. It's so much fun and it's so much easier than you think. So I'm going to show you what I did, what you need to know if you want to give it a go. I maintain for like 100 to 200 pounds, it's the best photography project you could do right now for the price. It's awesome. One thing I love about infrared photography is it works best on bright, dazzling days. You know those days as photographers that we tend to avoid like the plague? This gives us something to do on those bright days because the sun is out, the colours are more contrasty and punchy, and it's ideal for infrared photography. I think this is great because it gives us a project when we normally would not bother going out with our camera. So how does infrared photography work and what do you need? Well, there's two ways of doing it and there's pros and cons to both. First of all, you can buy a filter and use it on any camera. And this filter will block out all the visible light and just let in the infrared light, which means that you won't be able to use autofocus, you won't be able to shoot anything that's moving, you won't be able to use it like a normal camera because it works like, as soon as you put that sort of filter over the camera, it looks effectively black until it develops. So it's a pain in the backside to use that method, but the pro of this is if you're just dipping your feet into infrared photography, you don't have to convert a camera and it's much more cost effective. I opted for option 2, and that was to get a full spectrum converted camera. Now you can do this yourself if you are brave. I am not brave. I am not brave, ladies and gentlemen. I will spray paint a camera, but going into the nuts and bolts of this thing and ripping something off the sensor, that's not for me. I went to eBay for the answer and I bought this ready converted camera for £140. Now, I just wanted something that was relatively affordable that would get me into infrared photography. So for 140 quid for the camera already converted, well happy. The pros of using a converted camera means you are not tethered to a tripod because you can use normal shutter speeds. You can use autofocus as normal and you'll be able to compose your images as normal because you'll be able to see some sort of reference of what the final image will look like on the back of the camera. And if you opt for internal infrared filters, which I'll talk about in a second, so inside here, I've got a little filter in there and it just sort of pops out. That means you can change the lenses. It's just pretty organic. It's like using a normal camera and it's really, really intuitive. I'll put that back inside now. Colour contrast is what I'm looking for in my compositions. I think that's how the bright foliage pops when it comes to the edit because you need something for it to contrast against. And unlike regular photography, big clear blue skies look pretty amazing. I think usually I like some clouds or some detail in the sky for standard photography, but for infrared photography, it gives you that bold contrast that looks pretty good. So once you have your fully converted camera, there's one more thing left to buy, and that's the thing that I just showed you. So a full converted camera will give you the full spectrum of infrared light. The camera will now be able to receive it. But there's different frequencies. I think it's frequencies. Let me know in the comments if it's wrong. I am not a technical brain. There are different frequencies of infrared which will give you different stylized looks. So for instance, that thing inside this is a 720 nanometer filter, which gives me the Barbie world sort of look. If you wanted to go black and white, you need to go higher up the spectrum to around 800 to get that high contrast black and white. If you want to get that richer red sort of foliage, I have a second filter that is an external filter for that purpose as well. And when I'm showing the shots of this, I'll show you which filter did what so you can get a good idea. Now these filters will only work with full spectrum converted cameras. You can't just stick one of these on a normal camera and expect it to work. So even though there's the method with filters and then you add filters into this method, there are two separate types of filters, just to be clear. Beware of too much foliage. Because we're working with light that isn't visible to us, you've no idea how much infrared light bounces around. And when there's a lot of foliage, all of that light can become one uniform colour because it's bouncing around everywhere and reflecting off everything. So I think finding scenes where there's a little bit of foliage works better than a completely overwhelmed scene, because then it does become one colour sometimes. Also, it's weird to figure it out. Like, sometimes the colours that just look black to the human eye can pop in infrared. Like, you won't know until you take a few test shots how things will look in camera. It's really, really interesting. Now, you don't want to be using auto white balance when you're shooting infrared photography. I suppose when you're shooting raw, it matters a little bit less because you can probably change it in post, but I think there's value to be had in seeing something on the back of the camera that sort of resembles what it will look like at the end. This is with the white balance set as cool as it can go. So as you can see, the foliage does look quite white, which is what I'm hoping the final edit will look like. And this is what the auto white balance looks like. So suddenly we don't see the white foliage, everything's just red, 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 and you don't really get a good idea for your compositions this way. So setting your white balance as cool as it will go is a good option. Sometimes, because infrared is a lot of red light, it's in the name, you can set the white balance on something green to counteract it. So if you just set your white balance to like a piece of grass, for example, then it'll look a little bit better in camera. There's a lot of trial and error, but using auto white balance is probably not the way to go because it'll just look completely red usually. And of course, always shoot raw in case you get that bit wrong, because you've got much more chance of pulling it back if you're shooting in raw. Oh, please. Our shadows look super dramatic. So we've got our photos. What the heck do we do with them? There is a little bit more post-processing involved when it comes to infrared photography. There's a couple of extra steps. Bear with me, it's easy. I will tell you how to do it, but it is a little bit different to a standard photograph. I use Photoshop and Lightroom for this whole thing, and you do need both programs. But I think there are other methods where you could just use one or the other, but this is the method that I've currently been using. So the first thing to understand about these RAW files is because it's showing you infrared information, which is, as you can guess, a lot of red information. The white balance on standard Lightroom doesn't go as cool as we need to see the effects that we want. So you need to create a custom profile to allow that slider to go further down. Now there's two ways of doing this. There is a free piece of software from Adobe where you can create one of these custom profiles yourself. Unfortunately, that only works on Windows. If you have a silicone Mac like moi, that doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. And I thought my journey was over at this point. I thought I'd gone to the effort of buying the camera, taking the photographs, and now I couldn't blooming edit them. But I found this video on YouTube. This man, my knight in shining armor, he's taking it upon himself to make custom profiles for loads of different cameras, all for free as well. So all I needed to do was download his handy dandy files for the Sony A5000, which is the camera that I was using. And then I was sorted. You can import those into Lightroom as a photo profile, and then you've got a one-click solution. If you want to do this, you can either make the profile yourself. There's plenty of tutorials online. If you are a Mac user, just use this guy's wonderful profiles. So in Lightroom, with your photo profile inserted, you just press the photo profile, then we right-click and edit in Photoshop. There's just one more techie thing to do, and then we can get to the creative stuff. What we need to do is swap the red and blue channels in the color mixer. So you can do this as an adjustment layer, and you just need to put 0 where it said 100 and then 100 where it said 0, basically. I've saved this as an action so that I can also do this with one click in Photoshop, because I'm a nerd. Anyway, once you've done this, save, back to Lightroom we go. Now the fun can begin. In here, we should start by correcting the exposure, and then we can set our white balance. We can set it on different parts of the images to get different effects. And then it's pretty much doing whatever you want to do to taste, to be honest. The great thing about infrared light, I suppose, is it's not visible to the human eye, so there's absolutely no rules in what these things should turn out like. So go wild. And that's how you edit them in a nutshell. It's definitely more art than science. There are no real rules. Just have a mess with your white balance and see what sparks joy with you. So, after my tinkering and my 2 different types of infrared filters, I think these images were my favourites. Let me know which ones you like best in the comments as well. And let me know if you'd like to try infrared photography. I'll do my best to answer questions if you are on that journey. And I maintain for around £200, this is the most photography fun bang for buck you can get. It's so creative and so interesting, something that's completely different. So in the process of documenting all of my infrared tutorials and experiences over on my blog at microphonenerds.com, which is my Squarespace hosted website. I've had it for many, many years and it is the love of my life. This video is sponsored by Squarespace and I love so much that I get to shout about a service that I use literally all the time on this channel. It's such a great match. Creating a website with Squarespace is super simple and the results look really professional as well. Like I love the little animations on mine when I scroll down. I just think it's those little finesse details that make it stand out. So whatever you're passionate about, whether you want to create a photography portfolio or you want to write a blog about something that you're passionate about, you cannot go wrong with Squarespace. So head over to squarespace.com/microphonenerds and get started with your website. And then if you use the code microphonenerds when you're ready to launch, you will get a cheeky discount on your first purchase of a website or a domain. If you enjoyed this video and would like some more photography tips and nerdiness, then watch some of these videos next and subscribe for more.